Hello, and welcome again to Wise Women Wednesdays. I'm Jennifer Regular, a soul-centered empowerment coach with Lighting the Path, where I help those that are at a crossroads find a new direction in their life. I'm also the host of Wise Women Wednesdays here on YouTube, and soon to be a podcast as well, where I like to gather women from around the world who have a message to share, who's been on a spiritual journey and has found so much more consciousness and insight along that journey that they're willing to share with us. Today, I'm here with SARAH LAMOND. She's joining us from Capetown, South Africa, and she's an accredited integrative Enneagram facilitator and qualified ICF, that's International Coaching Federation coach. She has always had a deep interest in enabling individuals, partnerships, and teams to engage as effectively as possible to enable growth, resilience, collaboration, and impact. And she uses the Enneagram as one of the many tools in which to do this. SARAH has a deep appreciation for the nuanced complexities and insights this powerful system offers, and she'll be sharing some of that today. When she's not partnering or connecting with humans in service to clients in the community, she schedules all her meetings in the wilderness, as she believes moving in nature or seated on a mountaintop offers the clearest connection and quality signal of all. So today she's here to talk about conscious leadership through the Enneagram. Welcome, SARAH. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Jen. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're doing some really amazing work. And being able to restore yourself in the wilderness, I think, is also important, where we get to engage in that activity and also be able to receive from the world that we're trying to create and try and integrate all of that. And I know that you've become really passionate over the years in the Enneagram process. Can you tell us what that's all about and how you bring that into a leadership position?
So yeah, it actually, the Enneagram I was first kind of introduced to in 2014 and then again in 2015, actually in Canada, British Columbia at Hollyhock. And I really, each time it just kind of really settled and sat with me, and I got really interested and curious in the model and the fact that there was a model that could help us to almost guide us with a map of kind of human motivation and human behavior, and really get a sense of not only ourselves and the many different parts of ourselves, but also understand how we are all and each as human beings coming from such different perspectives. And that for me was quite profound. My own interest in human behavior, my own interest in like transformation and growth and development, understanding people, and really a love for humans, and how do we support ourselves most effectively to thrive. And it's amazing being alive, but we don't all thrive. You know, I think a lot of the time we're kind of in a bit of a fog, and we don't necessarily know. We don't have a kind of guidebook when we come out and we're ready to kind of navigate this journey of life. We don't have a guidebook necessarily, and our guidebook is often kind of conversations and our education, and those are perspectives that are external. And it's so nice when we can somehow have a guidebook that doesn't give us a external perspective. It rather kind of goes, of these, which ones do you really resonate with? Which ones speak to you of these archetypes? And so that's very much my interest in the Enneagram. And that's kind of when I then started to study it. And then I actually got accredited and trained, and now I'm working with it and journeying with my clients with it, which, I think for me, it's such a complex system. And yet, if you're just having a conversation with somebody, you can just help share what the Enneagram is in quite a light way. But if you're journeying with somebody over, some clients I've been working with the Enneagram for 2 years. And so it's this constant kind of onion peeling, delayering kind of journey of self-discovery and also of growth and maximizing one's strengths. And yeah, just we're constantly learning and evolving. So the Enneagram is just a really wonderful tool to support that.
What an honor to be able to witness that in another human being and to see that unfold. And it must just be fascinating to see how someone becomes more aware and more awakened through that process. What was the process like for you when you learned about your own Enneagram? What kind of insights did you gain through that? What was your journey like?
Yeah, amazing. So I think for me, the most profound piece of the Enneagram was that within us, we hold everything. And I usually like to use this kind of analogy that, so the Enneagram is made out of these 9 kind of archetypes. And within each archetype, there is a specific motivation. So if I use the analogy of we're all sitting, we're kind of sitting around a round table and there are 9 seats at this table, we usually have a seat that we are kind of drawn to. And that particular seat, we like the design of it, we like the aesthetic of it, we like the way it feels against our skin, we like the perspective that this particular seat at this table gives us to kind of look at the rest of the table. And that's kind of a bit of a comfort zone. And at the same time, it's what we like. And that's totally fine, and we can own it. And if we just stretch ourselves a little bit more, it is that we as human beings have access to every single seat at the table. But often we choose, because of nature and nurture and our own kind of programming from childhood, we often choose to sit at one particular seat. Sometimes we're quite fixed at that seat, and we can't actually ever go and sit at the seat next to us on either side of us or on the other side of the table, because we don't like the way it makes us feel, or we don't like the perspective. And so that little analogy, I mean, it's one of many analogies, and the Enneagram is one of many models, but I find it's the most powerful model to use, just to get that perspective that we have all the potential in the world to integrate and use different skills within us and parts of ourselves, awaken parts of ourselves. For me, the Enneagram did that. I was able to see what seat I was sitting at, what seat I'd become quite attached to, the lens at which I was kind of looking at the rest of the table and kind of going, oh, I don't like that because of X, Y, Z, or I don't like that, or that one scares me, and so I don't usually go and sit at that seat. And it really helped me to just get a sense of the lie of the land, and that's that if I want to step up and go and take a seat, the active controller, which is often a kind of archetype that is very leadership orientated, quite confrontational, and embodies or resonates with quite a high energy of action, then I have that within me. It's just, how do I get to know that part of myself? And can I accept that there's a part of me that actually loves standing within a collective and actually leading and I can be quite assertive, and so really it helped me to understand parts and kind of facets of myself that had either maybe gone to sleep, or that I had maybe, I was fearful of accessing because they were too powerful or they were too frightening. So that was really helpful. That was very much my journey with the Enneagram.
So would you say then that the awareness kind of brought it all to light for you and kind of lightened up the whole process where you were able to really lean into it? And it sounds like a very individual process, but then I think too, there's a lot that comes out when you surround yourself with people around you, and it kind of creates a system of sorts. Would you agree with that?
And Jen, that's why I think it has become so popular within corporates and multinationals and big organizations that are so well established. because, and especially around the pandemic, you know, the last 2 years have been discombobulating for all of us. We haven't quite known, like, what is truth? I'm so uncertain. The media is telling me one thing, the paper I'm reading is telling me another, the doctor I listen to is, you know, and there's so many different narratives at play, and tuning into your own truth at the same time as who can I trust, has been quite disconnecting. And so we've noticed it in working with corporates and kind of bigger organizations, the collective organizations, is this really kind of fragmented culture, because now all of a sudden people aren't as connected. Some people are working from home. Some people have all of a sudden had to pick up their lives, and, you know, they're now working remotely, and work colleagues that they could energetically connect with and get a sense with, and people that were extroverted who craved getting the energy and that kind of just communication with their partners and their work colleagues were all of a sudden not able to. And so it's just a shift. It's not good or bad, it's just a shift. But what the Enneagram, as I have found and experienced, is that it's been able to kind of bring it all together and hold a space of almost like a mental model. So even though we are not sitting side by side, even though my work colleagues are now, when we don't have this kind of, we're not all sitting under one roof of the traditional office and workplace, and things are maybe more hybrid and changing, the Enneagram is giving us a language and a way of seeing things that can be incredibly supportive whilst we're disconnected. And because I'm now understanding how to support myself and lead myself better, because I'm now understanding that maybe that's the archetype that I particularly resonate with of the 9 archetypes, I'm now able to understand my work colleagues and where they are. And we've now got a bit of a common language and something to talk through whilst our culture is changing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Yes, the conversation has changed, and the place we have those conversations have changed, and in our environments. And it's interesting too, because although we've seen disconnected and distance and having to talk to screens, I hear a lot of people saying they're not noticing the screens as much anymore, that they're able to lean in more. So that's kind of a nice feeling. And sure, there's a lot of cons that come with that too. We still have, you know, the screen and electromagnetic frequency changes, but we're also seeing each other's homes. You know, everyone is seated in their home or in some kind of little spot or environment that they've created to be able to do their work and present themselves into the world. And we're able to have so much more connection with the world now, being online, where working out an office or a building structure, or, you know, was kind of limited to who we were accessing and who we were relating with and who we were able to service. And now with it being online, we're showing up in our homes, you know, and we get to see each other in our homes and in our work environments. And that's a whole interesting way of being and relating with each other now too. We're not just all in the same office. We're actually meeting from each of our homes, and that creates a whole different environment for conversations and work and so on. And I know your business is called Signal Through the Noise. Tell us about that. What does that mean?
And it's so interesting what you were just saying earlier, Jen, around, I found myself nodding away because it's so a truth for me, and it's coming up in conversations that for some people, this space of Zoom and, you know, kind of Microsoft Teams and all of these kind of online ways of connecting has brought the globe closer, has made the connections and the network accessible, even more accessible. And so, you know, work colleagues don't need to fly across the world to have these big conferences, which are often quite stressful because you're away from home and you are needing to juggle a number of things, and you're on a flight that is a different time zone, and you arrive at this conference, you know, kind of hoping to gather information and make connections, and yet there's a part of you that you've left behind. And I think there's something like what you're saying is this insight into who are you? I can see you've got a beautiful tapestry on your wall, and you've got a plant and a chime in the background. And that's interesting to me. I'm already seeing a part of you that I didn't know when I just saw you face to face, or, you know, walking under one roof in a building, or, you know, kind of putting our time sheets in, and, you know, and I think there's something really, to me, just to bring it back to that question of signal, to me, I think there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise out there that we're trying to navigate, to try and find the truth and trying to really make a connection. And my experience, 40 years here on earth has very much been around, how do we find connection? How do we find that signal where we've got there's a direct line, we're on the same channel, and I hear you and I see you, and I don't need to do anything, but there's a connection, and that connection is truth and authenticity, and that is incredibly fulfilling, and it helps us to ground, and it helps us to gain clarity of our thoughts, because we are relational beings, you know, like we need each other to learn and understand and share and express ourselves. And I think that, to me, is very much what signal is about. It's how do we declutter, and for everybody it's different, you know. It's not necessarily about being silent, but it's about being aware of, how do you find your signal? For some people it's going for a walk up the mountain. For some people it's meditating for 20 minutes in the morning and the evening. For some people it's playing with children, they wake them up. So it's almost like the signal, to me, how I understand it, is very much around a presence. How do you get present to who you are and life, and at least turn down the noise? Because my personal journey of turning down the noise has been a long one, and it's been very noisy in my mind. And so turning that down and finding out what are those practices that you can do that really help you to turn down the noise and really connect with your signal. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And for you, it's the wilderness you mentioned.
100%.
Yes. And how wonderful that you have access to that. So for those of us who don't, bring us into that. What does that feel like for you out in the wilderness?
Yeah, Jen, I often joke that, you know, I live in a very small little apartment, but I've got a very big life. And I think that's, I love that kind of philosophy on life, is small home, big life. And my small home is full. You can see a little bit of it with plants, and the wilderness is not hard to get to. It doesn't cost anything. The greatest thing is time, giving yourself that time.
Yes.
And being, even if you are, I mean, I find one of the specific points in my life where I really built this practice and started kind of creating and developing the practice was actually completely unaware. It was almost intuitive. I was just completely pulled towards it. And it was sunrise hikes after my mom had passed away. It felt like it felt like the truest thing at a time when I just couldn't make sense of why did she have to, you know, get diagnosed with cancer, and why, and I was going through a whole bunch of things, but I'm so young, and I so wanted to be part of my journey through life and to play this role. And I found the wilderness and going out into nature was the most grounding thing for me. And I knew that the sun would always rise, and there was something really special about that clarity, and that, you know, that kind of energy of having the sun in the morning, and what it required was getting up really early and just getting out there. South Africa is a little bit sketchy just in terms of your own safety, so I had to take that into account. But it was, yeah, on a much deeper level, it was around being in a space that felt incredibly nourishing during a time where I felt quite discombobulated and quite sore and raw. And it was a beautiful anchor.
I find there's such a strong connection too with the outer sun and our inner sun, you know, being able to ignite that light and expand our heart. And I find that there's real potency in that. One of the affirmations that I like to use in the morning is, may the sun illuminate my heart so that my heart may illuminate the world. And I just find there's that constant interaction with the elements and with our own bodies. And you mentioned early in our conversation about everything exists within us too. And I find that really powerful and really meaningful, and making us a part of in being it as well, you know. And there's just such a strong connection. When we connect strongly with ourselves, we connect more strongly with others and with the world at large. And yeah, having a big home but a big life, I love that kind of saying. You know, we don't need to take up so much space. There's some kind of sustainability even in that. And like you say, not having to travel as much anymore for work, then we're taking care of the environment in that way too. And building more sustainable systems within our community and our connections and our network. Right.
Yeah.
And it is a net. It's, you know, who we're catching and bringing in, who we're drawing in and in that net. Right. And to make sure that they're meaningful and quality connections that we're bringing into our lives. Because I think that's really important too, to be able to know, you know, who and what's needed in our life to be able to sustain us, to help us grow, to help us evolve. And the Enneagram is such an interesting thing, because then you know who to invite to your table, right? Who's going to take up those different seats and perspectives at your table, right? Who are you going to invite to dinner, in a sense, right? To nourish each other and spend time with and break bread with. And so, yeah, what a fascinating process to have that Enneagram, and to have things outside of work and new ways of relating with each other. And in your work, is it just with corporate clients that you have, or who do you work with, Sarah?
So it's also, professional, it's professional, sorry, it's private clients, which are kind of individual leaders. Often, a lot of them are kind of in social impact or some kind of humanitarian work, which has been really interesting. And then from a kind of corporate organizational piece, it's often an individual journey with some of the leaders within a corporate or within an organization. I'd rather use the word organization, but so it's individual work with the Enneagrams, kind of that introduction and kind of giving them the lie of the land, and then working with that, but not as the core focus. So once they understand just the model and the tool of the Enneagram, then, you know, they're the expert of themselves. So I help out when I offer them the knowledge of the Enneagram to use and to kind of create a language. And then from there, it's actually working with themselves and a team and understanding how better to relate to others, to realize that they're, as you say, you know, there are 9 seats at this table, and it's interesting to know who's sitting in each seat and which seat they find comfortable and why, and what a beautiful conversation to have. And how do we have more of these conversations? And the more people of diversity and range around the table, the more juicy the conversation. And if it's, you know, if we're able to develop skills of listening, the most simple storytelling skills of listening, of sharing, communicating effectively, holding space, being empathetic. Yes. They're such beautiful, very human, very grounding kind of foundational skills that we learn when we're this high, but that we lose along the way because of the noise and the craziness of life and our experiences, and kind of getting knocked down and then trying to pull ourselves up and forgetting a lesson, and then, you know, learning it and bringing it back in, and then getting quite awed by something that has happened in your life. And so I think that's very much part of how we work. I mean, there's a very contained structure within working with an organization, because a lot of organizations have been have a mandate of, kind of the bottom line and profit and results driven. What are the outputs and return on investment, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't have any of that without the human dynamic and the culture and the connections being cared for and supported. Your human resource and your talent is everything.
Yes.
And when they're happy, then everybody wins,
Amazing. I mean, it sounds like the traits of an awakened leader, and that you're really cultivating conscious leadership that they're now taking into this organization, which then supports a kind of culture that can thrive. That's incredible work, Sarah. Thank you so much for the work that you do. It sounds incredible. And I wonder that other people would probably feel the same way. So how can they connect with you?
So I have a website that is currently it's not under construction. So it's going to be, I'm actually developing it, but it is www.thesignal.co.za. Or otherwise they can email me at sarah@thesignal.co.za. And I mean, how I usually work is, like with most things, is that you just start with a conversation, understand. It's very important to me, is understanding what's really at the core of somebody's challenge, or kind of even what they're wanting to build, a vision that they're wanting to create, and how can I come on board and support in a sustainable way that that obviously helps and is effective for a solution that they're wanting to get. So that's very much, it's usually through my website or email directly, and then we'll have a conversation.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for the invitation, Sarah. And I encourage everyone to do that. Go explore the website and see what's been happening on there. You might find some articles and services that really resonate. And you can also just reach out and email Sarah and get that conversation started. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining us here today from all the way at the other end of the world. I'm stationed here in Victoria, BC, and you're out in Capetown, South Africa.
Love that.
Through the power of Zoom, here we are. So, so it's been such a pleasure having you here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely talking to you. I can carry on forever.
I agree. There's so much more I would like to ask you. And we'll have another guest here next Wednesday on Wise Women Wednesdays on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today. And don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.